I started the Real Mental podcast because it bugs me when film and TV miss the mark about how mental health gets portrayed. Real Mental is a podcast where a film loving psychiatrist, that's me, talks to directors, writers, actors, and critics to help people figure out their life by getting to the truth about mental health in the movies. Welcome, Alex Billington, to the Real Mental podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
And today we're going to talk about a movie I really loved called The Friend. And I'm really excited to discuss it with you. But first, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Alex, obviously. I'm a film lover and a film critic. I've been running a blog, a website called firstshowing.net for the last 20 years. And we talk a lot about movies. The goal of my site is always to keep people informed and excited about cinema. Not only big Hollywood movies, but anything big and small and exciting and interesting. For the last 20 years, I've been traveling the world going to film festivals, which is where I watch a lot of the more interesting and more intellectual films. And I love to bring attention to them. And I'm originally from Colorado, but now I live in Berlin, Germany. And I'm very happy here, and I'm happy to talk about movies any day, every day. Movies. Let's talk.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, we're going to talk today about the movie The Friend, which is an interesting movie because it kind of comes across a bit like an indie film, but it has very high profile Hollywood
Yeah,
actors in it.
yeah.
So, why don't you share your thoughts about the film and then I can add my 2 cents about the psychology underlying it?
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually really excited to talk about it with you. Ever since I first saw this film, I know it's based on a book. I haven't read the book. I own it and just haven't read it. And I'm very much was intrigued by how much the film both is and isn't about dogs, but it's actually much more about mental health and psychology and what she's going through. And the film, which is stars Naomi Watts as a woman whose mentor commits suicide, and she kind of has to deal with the after effects of that and kind of deal with not only what it's like to have a close friend pass away like that, but then also kind of struggling to deal with what she's doing with her life. And this dog comes in, and it's a giant Great Dane dog. And as a dog lover, like the moment he comes in, I'm like, I love this dog. He's the best. I mean, I think a lot of people, that's why you buy the book. Like there's a picture of the dog on it. You're like, I got to buy this. And the story, which when I first heard about it, people said, oh, it's not really about the dog. It's not really about that dog. It's about her mind. I'm like, it is about the dog, though. The dog is an essential part of her progress, of her journey. And the dog is also an essential part of her learning what she has to go through at this point in her life to grow up and to get to her next level of her life, which is that she has to take care of the dog. He's a huge beast. She has to take him out. She has to like build this routine with him. And I really love this film for not only the depiction of her connection with this dog, the performance from the dog named Bing. He's just wonderful. He's really evocative, actually has a lot of emotion that plays into her story really well. In addition to it, I lived briefly in New York City too, and I think it's a really wonderful New York City film. I think it really captures the city in a way that is both accurate in how stressful and intense it can be. And I think it's the same for cities like Toronto and London, but also really captures the beauty of New York. And I think why people love being there. I think there's this interesting aspect to her living there because she has a rent controlled home she lives in, and it's absolutely stunning. They make a joke about it being small, and I'm like, this is not a small place. Anyone who's lived in New York knows this. But it's also she feels a deep connection to this place, in which I think is important to her connection to New York City because she spends so much of her life going out and around the city and spending time with Bing and interacting with people that all of this place together and depicting New York as actually like a really beautiful place to live, that despite the stress and intensity of the city, you can find peace and harmony in New York. And I really love the way it depicts that in relation to her dog friendship and the way she's growing up. And I think most of all, I was moved by actually watching her psychological progress, which is exactly what I want to hear from you, because I think you don't really realize at the start that she's struggling that much. And then you watch her over time go through all this and literally speak, I don't want to say to the camera, but through her narration, speak to the audience directly about what she's going through and how she's experiencing and changing with the dog and with this moment of her life. And I found that so movie something that I can connect to, which is what I really love about cinema, is when I can, even if I'm not a single woman living in New York City, I felt so connected to her and what she's going through and how she's dealing with this and how she's struggling. And I think a lot of people, I hope, I assume, can connect with that as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think that it's one of those films that anyone can relate to.
Yeah.
And, when I watched it and I thought about it afterwards, first of all, I was just so delighted by the movie and by the
Good.
performances. But I was thinking about something that one of her neighbors told her, her
Mm,
friend who was her neighbor, and how the character went to this apartment, went to live there in order to take care of her ailing father. and
Mm,
spent time there caring for her father until he passed away, and then she inherited the apartment. So this apartment has meaning because it was her dad's place,
mhm,
obviously a
mhm,
father who she loved and was willing to take time and care for him for a while he was ill. And
mhm,
so the apartment is already imbued with a sense of loss,
mm,
with love and with loss. So we're already getting that theme woven in from multiple angles.
mhm,
And then her mentor who dies, Walter, he also was a complicated person and they had a complicated relationship because
yeah,
they briefly had an affair and then realized that they were better off as friends, but
mhm,
there's layers of loss there too.
mhm,
And here she is, her big project now is working on the memoir, doing an edit of all his letters for a publisher with
mm,
his daughter from, I think, another affair.
mm.
And this guy was, he got around. And
Yeah,
she's doing it, I think it seems like she's doing it, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong. She's doing it because she wants to stay connected to Walter,
mm,
but
makes
but her heart's not really in it, and she keeps
mm,
dawdling and procrastinating, and the publisher has to confront her one day and ask her, "Are you gonna do this?" And she goes, "Yes," but when she says yes, everyone knows, like, that's not a yes that's convincing, and,
mm,
she's trying to ward off the pain of her loss, and
mm,
she's one of those people I call, like, the walking wounded or the quietly suffering. You would never know by looking at them that they're in pain,
mm,
but they're going through something and it's
yeah,
tough. And
yeah,
so when Walter basically leaves her the dog, as an inheritance and
mm,
nobody else wants it, which is understandable, 150 pounds worth of
yeah,
depression, right? A depressed dog,
yeah,
and the dog, is basically like lying on her bed every night, moping, and she's like
mhm,
sleeping on the floor. And she takes the dog to the vet, and the vet says, "This is a good dog. Don't turn him into a bad dog. Get him off your bed."
yeah, yeah,
She has to learn how to set boundaries. She has to learn
mhm,
how to be a loving authority. She
mhm,
has to learn to, like you say, care for this dog, but she also has to learn, like you said, to be the adult in this
mm,
relationship and
mhm,
not just be this lost soul who is kind of clinging to the people who she loved, who she lost. And here she has a living being who needs her and,
mm,
and is not going anywhere, at least not for the time being. And she has to come to terms with that. And I think that giving love and caring for this creature who needs her so much, needs her maybe more than she needs him,
mm.
I think that's really what heals her.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I know it's cliche to say, but it's a beautiful presentation of the common thing that pets provide psychological and relief to
Yeah.
people. And that, I think it's cliche and that some people do find it a little bit overwhelming when you're like, "Well, just get a pet." But this is to me really an example of a story where you're like, this is an example of what you said. The pet needs her as much as she needs him, and they both grow through this relationship. And I think that
Yeah.
was so beautifully presented. I assume that it comes from the book as well. And I've always wondered, is the author of the book also had this exact experience, or is she kind of drawing from what she's heard in her own kind of animal relationships? Because I'm like, this is this kind of story that only a true dog lover and dog owner would know and can like put on paper that way so beautifully and to show you so beautifully how they can heal you and how you can help heal them. And also like adoption, it isn't, it's what you said, it's kind of forced adoption, but there's a beauty to this adoption that she provides to this dog. And like the whole time in the first half, I'm like, take the dog, love him, care for him. Like, I know you don't want to, but do it. You can grow. You'll get so much from him.
Yeah, no, she's definitely the reluctant caretaker initially. And, you mentioned the writer Sigrid Nunez, and I think
Mm.
I've read some of her books, not this one, but I've read a number of her books, including the book that the recent movie The Room Next Door was based on,
Oh,
which
okay,
which
okay, yeah.
comes from the book What Are You Going Through? And I think this author, Nunez, writes a lot about loss.
Mm,
So whether it's particular to
mm,
these situations that she's writing about or not, I think she must have some real life experience of loss because she
sure.
writes so poignantly and beautifully about it. But this situation with this dog, I think it makes it more moving as a film for
Mm,
her to be reluctant.
mhm,
And you also can understand why she's reluctant. It's not just that this is a 150-pound huge depressed dog, it's also because she doesn't have any emotional capacity right now. She's
mm,
she's a wreck. She
mm,
won't even face how much of a wreck she is until,
mhm,
down the road in the movie, but she's a wreck and she has nothing to give. And
mm,
here's this dog that has such enormous needs and an enormous frame. It's just bigness of want and
Mhm,
sadness. And here she is, and she has nothing to give. And she's like, no. But
mhm,
then she can't help it. Like you
mhm,
said, she can't help it. Her heart has to open because this
mhm,
dog is just a being of absolute beauty and love. And
mhm.
she relents. She has to. She has no other choice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of really great moments in this film that I think show, and this is to me the great story, like the power of cinema. And I wanna ask you about this, about what you think about the power of cinema as a, like, psychiatric help in a way. And it can be bad, but I also think this is an example of it being really good and really helpful, and then the storytelling of what you've just described is exactly the power of someone else being able to watch this and say, "I was moved by her. I may not be her, but I'm moved by her journey with this dog," and that it inspires me to also make that move and journey through whether it be loss or whatever her struggle will be. And then, as you said, there's so much on her plate between not only the loss, but her own just struggles in life in general, that I think it's like, rather than depicting someone completely hopeless and lost, you actually see a story here where you're like, there is hope, there is potential in moving on. And I really like that that's what this film provides as a piece of storytelling, not just as cinema where we love the dog, but also as storytelling where you're like, this is something I can trust and believe in. It is not too fake. It is not too out there, but I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist, or I don't know how it can, if it has that potential, but I feel like it has that potential.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you asked that because one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast, Real Mental, is because I feel that film does have this incredible potential
Mm,
to offer real life insights and to provide people with more than even intellectual understanding, but like a real emotional awareness
yeah.
of things and to empathize with characters. And the storytelling is so powerful through images
Mhm,
that we can't help but be drawn in and change if it's done well, like you say. And one of the things I talk about in my blurb for the podcast is how, I talk about how films get it right and get it wrong. And
mm,
when they get it wrong, it's not good because
yeah,
they can misinform and
mhm,
confuse people. But when they get it right, it's amazing because they can do so much. So I like to choose films that I think get it right. And I also like to talk about films that get it wrong so that people
mhm,
can understand this is not how it should be. For example, romantic comedies where, the jilted or the, rejected lover stalks their person and, as an act of like romantic ardor, but
yeah,
it's stalking. And in real life, you'd get arrested for it. But in
mm,
the movies, it's like this wonderful romantic thing. And so, I like to point out when they get it wrong so that people can understand, okay, this
mhm,
is not how people should behave. But when
mhm,
they get it right, it's also wonderful because everyone has this incredible collective experience. You've watched it, I've watched it, we've had a similar
mhm,
experience, and it also brings people together. It makes us feel connected because we both had this experience, even though we watched the film separately. We still
yeah,
had a shared experience.
yeah,
And
definitely.
it's about our humanity, our common humanity, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. This is good. It's also nice to hear this from someone who appreciates cinema on this intellectual level. A lot of friends I know who are not in the cinema world just see it as pure entertainment and pure escapism, and I'm like, there's actually a lot you can gain from cinema, in both good and bad ways. But there is truly,
Yeah.
like, in the realm of cinema with 1,000 movies to choose from every year, if you choose the right ones, you're gonna watch something that really does shake you up and move you inside, not just makes you laugh and giggle and smile. And I think there's a potential in both. You can watch a movie that does that. I laugh a lot at Bing in this movie, and he makes me laugh, but I also still feel moved by it. And I'm most appreciative of just how much intellectual conversation there is in this film and how much she admits through her narration as to what she's going through. I thought that was so powerful that she's not sugarcoating it. She's not like faking it in a little bit of way and making it work for cinema. They're like, this is the real, brutal, honest truth about what is in her mind right now and what she's going through. I found that also very strong.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love the most about the movies is it's
Mhm,
that interplay of entertainment and insight so that
mhm,
you can have a good time, but you can also have a meaningful time,
mhm.
and like all my relationships, I want to be like that. Like I want to be with
Yeah,
friends who I have fun with, but we can also have a real conversation with.
yeah,
And I
exactly.
want to go to a movie where the same thing happens because
Mhm,
that's richer, like superficial entertainment, it's like empty calories. It's kind of okay, but it's doesn't really give you much, but a film that has ideas, real ideas that are
mhm,
realized, fully
mhm.
realized, that's
Yep,
incredibly satisfying for
yeah,
me.
yeah. And I assume therefore it's playing in Canada right now, right?
Oh, yeah. I think it's come out or it's coming out very soon. And I'm just very excited for people to go watch it. And
Yeah,
you
me too.
don't have to be a dog lover. And that's the thing about
Mhm,
this film. Yes, it features this enormous dog, and the dog is in almost every scene, but you don't have to be a dog lover to watch the movie. The one thing that it has that's universal is the experience of loss. And if you're a human
mhm,
being at several points in your life, you're going to experience loss,
mhm,
great or small. And everyone can relate to someone struggling to deal with loss.
mm,
And also, like you said,
mm,
people who are kind of lost within themselves and don't know who
mm,
they are and where they're headed. And
mm,
so it's loss on kind of two levels, the loss of a
mm,
loved one and also a sense of loss of purpose.
mm,
And this movie really explores those two themes so beautifully and tenderly. And
mm,
anyone who is kind of struggling with what am I going to do in my future, or anyone who has experienced loss will relate so powerfully to this film. So whether you
mm.
love the dog, you're indifferent about the dog, although I would be surprised if someone was indifferent
Yeah,
about that dog.
yeah.
But you don't have to be a dog lover to love this film because
Mm.
the themes that it touches on are so human and so important.
Yeah, exactly.
And now let's pause for a quick word about my other podcast. I'm Dr. Marcia Sirota. We all need to be inspired and uplifted these days. We need a good laugh and we need to be moved. In the Ruthless Compassion podcast, I speak with a wonderfully diverse group of people. They've overcome daunting obstacles and they're making unique, exciting contributions to our communities and to our world. The Ruthless Compassion podcast has created more than 175 episodes over the past several years. Why not have a listen to it today?
There's actually one other scene I really wanted to ask you about, and I mean, I hope that people watching have either seen it or are planning to because it's a scene near the end that it's kind of not a full spoiler, but it's near the end of it. There's the scene where she goes to her therapist and she's having a conversation, and it breaks out into this. It takes a little while to figure it out, but it's a fantasy sequence where she's going through with a small dog and envisioning it, and then you kind of realize what's happening, which is at one point she's having a conversation with Walter, who is dead, and she's having a conversation with the dead Walter. And what I thought was so powerful about the scene was that I assume a lot of psychiatrists want people to do this. They want them to say, not only do you need to confront this person or this thing in your life, but you need to do so in a brutally honest way, where you need to go yell at him and say, "How did you do this, Walter? Why? 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 Why?" And what was so great about what cinema can do is that it literally depicts this scene. No one in therapy can actually do this. They have to do it in their imagination. But here, we are seeing it happen. We are seeing her go talk with Walter. And I thought, this is incredible. I just hope that this is an accurate depiction of what medically people should be doing and not just like, again, a cinema fantasy. And I want to ask, is that the kind of scene that you actually think in this, even the kind of concept that people need to work through, is that something that is helpful to people? Do you really think that can make a difference?
Well, first of all, I'm pretty sure that Sigrid Nunez must have gone to therapy because
Yeah.
the way she depicted that was so accurate and so
Okay.
lovely.
Yeah.
Like,
I
I see a
figured.
lot of therapy in the movies, and I'm like, I don't know. But this one was very accurate and lovely, and the person playing the psychiatrist was wonderful. Um, Yes, a lot of times, one of the ways that we can process trauma or loss is by writing a letter to somebody, not sending it if they're still around, but
Mm,
writing a letter just as a way of venting and
mm,
understanding your feelings, or doing like a role play in the office
mm.
where you're speaking to a chair. They call it chair work in Gestalt therapy, where you
Oh,
speak to the chair and imagine the person that you want to talk to sitting in the chair and visualizing them and going through the whole role play. And you can play both roles, like you can play the Walter and you can play the Iris, you can
mm,
play both characters. But yes, it's a very helpful thing because it brings out onto the surface what
mm,
you're really feeling, what you're thinking, what you're going
mm,
through, and it helps you process your experience and your emotions. So yeah, it's an excellent tool,
mm,
and a lot of therapists use it. And yes, I think cinema is absolutely perfect for not just discussing this, but showing this
mm,
through images. And I'm glad you touched on it because one of the most powerful ways that cinema can affect us by showing us these
mm.
things that otherwise you couldn't see. And
Yeah.
it was so interesting. I loved that scene as well when she's sitting there and talking with Walter and just confronting him in a loving way, but like you say,
Yeah.
in a very direct way. So I thought that was a beautiful scene and very, very apt for psychotherapy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's what I was thinking. I'm like, I really hope this is helping her. I get a little bit worried as I'm watching it being like, she's dumping so much on him, and she's being so tough about what's happening. I'm like, I hope that emotion doesn't bring her down after, but I think that release is necessary. And I think, I guess it's because this is what the story is. I think then she can go home to Apollo, who was in the scene, but not in the scene. As you know, it's like a funny depiction with the little dog. But I love that she can then go home and feel the comfort he provides. Again, like as him, almost as a representation of Walter with her. And that there's anger and release and get your emotions out, but then there's comfort and relief that she gets with Apollo after. And I think those two connections also connect, which is where the ending of the film leads. And I don't want to give it away, but I like that that's where the film then leads after that scene and how she gets to that point.
Yeah, she's able to say what she needs to say, and she's able to let go of some of her anger,
Mhm.
and that opens her heart even more to love.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite an amazing film when you think about it. If you really sit and think about it,
Yeah.
it's got so much depth and so much, like, tenderness. That's the word I keep coming back to.
Mhm.
There's, even when she's confronting Walter quite strongly, you see so much love for him
Mhm.
in her. Like, she has so much love. So there's the whole movie has tenderness. The dog,
Yeah.
her experience, her interactions with the former wives, some who are
Yeah.
more prickly than others, but there's such a tenderness, and
Mhm.
Naomi Watts plays this, I have to say, this might be her best role ever. Like,
Yeah, I was
she plays it so beautifully in such a lovely way. You found the same? Yeah?
yeah, and I've seen her in a lot of stuff. Even her face,
Yeah.
the way she reacts to everything, I'm just like, "This is an incredible performance." This is a performance where you don't even question that it's a performance. You're like, "This person is going through this." And I'm just, like, lucky to watch her go through it. She's so incredibly good in this.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the kind of performance that should win awards, but
Yeah,
because it's such a quiet performance, I doubt that they'll notice her, but I wish they would
yeah,
because, she should totally be nominated for awards for this performance because it was just so beautifully, beautifully done, and
yeah,
the restraint she showed
yeah,
and the genuine, authentic emotion. Oh, man, that's what you really wanna see when you watch a film, right? So,
yeah,
yeah, I can't recommend it more highly for anyone, any human being, um, like, I think they would really enjoy this film, and the messages are not bash you over the head,
mhm,
but
mhm,
they're also not too subtle that you're gonna miss them. Like, if you're
yeah,
paying attention, you'll get them.
yeah, exactly.
So it just hits the sweet spot, I think. It gives you just what you need, which is, "Okay, this is really interesting."
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm completely with you, and this part of the reason I wanted to also come on and talk about it with you is I'm like, I wanna spread the word on this film. It's been so hard to convince anyone to see it. I'm like, the more we can talk about it, the more we can just maybe it'll take someone another year or 2 to find it, but then they can listen to this podcast, and I want to keep the conversation going about it. I think there's probably power in just the fact that a friend told you about this film you gotta watch more than, a film critic or someone, and then this film gets passed along and it kind of it grows as more and more people discover it. And that's my real hope for it. I think it has the potential to be beyond just awards and box office. It has this potential to connect with people deeply, as you said, with any human. And all I want to do is just keep talking about it with people. So I'm happy to keep talking about it.
That's wonderful, and I think, yeah, we really need to promote the good ones, right? We
Yeah,
need to,
yeah,
be cheerleaders for them because we need to see more films like this, I think,
yeah, definitely.
especially in these weird times. We need films that, talk about love and
Mhm.
caring and, a little bit of generosity of spirit and empathy. We need more empathy,
Yeah,
not less. So
definitely.
this is a really good film for the times as well.
Yeah, definitely. I agree completely.
Well, Alex Billington, it's been wonderful talking to you today about the movie The Friend, and hopefully we can have you back on the podcast now that we've met and we can talk
Sure.
about other films.
Yeah, definitely. There's always more to talk about. There's actually I wanna mention one that's recently, I think it's coming out soon there too, called The Assessment, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
another psychological thriller, sci-fi, but it's about parenting and a couple deciding whether or not to be parents and being assessed on this. I was, like, thinking about it, I was like, "I have to mention it today because it's also, while not the same as The Friend in any way, it is also a beautiful, interesting, fascinating psychological film that I think is also worth getting into."
Well, maybe we can discuss that in the future. I'll
For
I'll
sure.
have to get a look at it and then we can make a time to talk.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me on. I'm really glad we could talk about this.
Yeah, it's really been a pleasure. This is Dr. Marcia Sirota. Thanks for listening to the Real Mental Podcast. Please leave a review and your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to sign up for my free newsletter at marciasorota.md.com. And while you're at it, why not check out my Ruthless Compassion podcast with over 180 episodes and counting. If you have any ideas for guests for either Real Mental or Ruthless Compassion podcasts, please email us at info@marciasorota.md.com. Happy listening!